It's predicted that remote work will be dead in 3 years. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is our website. You can learn all about us there, including our partners and our companion podcast, TFGM Button, which usually drops on Tuesday mornings, audio only. And later in the show, we're going to be visiting with one of our partners, Deep Discount, and we're going to be reviewing some of the clues from last week's Criterion Collection Month giveaway, as well as telling you about some new releases and some picks for the month of October, with Halloween fast approaching.
October.
Boo. Hey, Tim, I always think of that thing, boo.
Boo. The Lance Armstrong ad, boo. That's all
You
we
should
could
just
say.
tell that story because I think he was down there for how many hours on camera, and Karen calls you. He can't act.
Well, he can't act. You know, poor Lance could not act, and which Martina could, which surprisingly, right? You would have thought it'd be an opposite. And there was this ad they did with these mad scientists with his white coats on. And, we created a monster and all this stuff. And showed him riding around the bike and then driving the car. And then they're like, well, I don't know what we're going to do for Lance. I don't know what line he can possibly deliver. And I just, with my smart ass comment, I'm like, what about boo? And the creative and the copy guys are like, that might work. So at the very end of the ad, he just looks at the camera and goes, boo.
Boo. Now, I remember the ad, Tim. He actually delivered the line quite effectively because guess what? It was 3 letters. B-O-O.
Boo. Which actually worked well with the ad, so it came out pretty good. But, I get credit for nothing.
You invented electricity, and God help,
Did you see that Madonna's brother died last week? Did you see that?
And Tim was were you a guest judge or was
Well,
he?
I was on the D- list of celebrity along with Derek Hartley that went to a Bruce Yelk production of, I think it was called Mr. Gay Philadelphia or Gay USA or something. And Madonna's brother, Christopher Ciccone, who just passed away at 63 of cancer, Madonna's brother, he was on the outs with her at that time. But Derek and I were at this club in Philly, and I didn't know Derek that well, and we were representing SiriusXM and OutQ. Mm-hmm. And this drunk old drag queen is yelling they're introducing the people, and it was some, menagerie of D- celebrity in Philadelphia plus Derek and I, which were, X-. And she keeps yelling, this drag queen, for Christopher's Ciccone. His name's Ciccone, or Ciccone, calling him Ciccone. And he wouldn't get up on stage, and then he's yelling about, his name being corrected. Fast forward, as the night falls into pieces, Derek ends up telling on the Derek Romaine show about the experience about how late that night at like 2:20, 3 o'clock in the morning, Ciccone had set off the fire alarm in the hotel and emptied the place out. And so it was quite an event. But
Tim, didn't we go on DNR years later and you brought up that story, mm-hmm. and I think Derek just laughed his ass off.
Oh yeah, it was.
And he remembered it, and he remembered the fire alarm,
and the drag queens, and I mean, it really was. It was just, it was one of those. It was a movie scene. It could have been a perfect. Mm-hmm. If somebody had videotaped it, it would have been the most perfect movie scene. And anyway, sadly, her brother, who left Detroit with her and was a choreographer for her in some of the Blondie Ambition tour and helped with dancing and choreography and costuming, whatever. Anyway, they were estranged for quite some time. He wrote a book, kind of a tell-all. But she said in the later years, as he got sick with cancer, they reconciled, and she gave a nice tribute to him on social media. So young, 63 years old.
Did they specify the type of cancer?
Just said cancer. Just said he died after illness of cancer. So.
I'm 63. To
young.
me, that's not old. Yeah. That is not old. Not old at all.
Tough gig, I thought, being a sibling of a superstar like that, right? I mean, it's got to be a tough gig.
Well, it's kind of like being Prince Harry. The name of his bio was Spare.
Yeah.
Thinking you're the spare.
Listen, he had the best job in the world. I've said that forever. He had all the benefit. He had all the benefit with none of the responsibility. He had to open a flower shop and a hospital, cut a ribbon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
drive fancy cars, live in a castle. What else are you doing? You had all the fun but none of the responsibility. I'd have taken that job all day long.
It must have,
Harry, you're crazy.
Yeah. Well, being royal, I suppose it's different.
Yeah.
So I came across a little thing that reminded me of a Trish story. I think you'll appreciate this. It's some guy wrote this as a post, and it says, "Man sits by me on train. Man, loads of psychopaths around here. Me, really? Man, loads, mate. Me? How'd you know? There's signs, aren't there? I guess. Man, I love them. 47 minutes of awkward silence. Man leaves train. He has a bike. I realized he was saying psychopaths."
Oh, my God.
That reminds me of Trish going to a club one time, our friend Tony, and he hears an announcement because he was in the dark room or the back room or something, or trying to find a friend. And he hears Marsha Wallace, and he thinks it says Marsha Wallace, who was on the Bob Newhart show, I think.
Right.
And it turns out that he's like, Marsha Wallace is here. Marsha Wallace
must be doing stand-up.
It's stand-up in the club. And then it turns out that the announcement just said, watch your wallets. Watch your wallets. Marsha Wallace. Here's another one that came across, and this is for our friend Lori and Will Chapman and Lori, because you'll recognize the tie-in. A quote says, "I made my kids watch Airplane, and they didn't think it was funny, and I just don't know where to go from here." So remember Lori told us they once had watched the, was it Animal House with their kids?
Right. One of them,
and the kids are like, "Mom,
Animal
Dad,
House, I think it was.
This is not funny."
Well, it's so politically incorrect. You can never make those films now, right?
No.
Blazing Saddles, any of those.
Think about Porky's. Remember Porky's?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned. So I watched a video of Chip Kidd, the famous book designer we had on the show, did the True Prep book. He tells a story, which you can't even say the word anymore, I don't think, but I will. He he's going to give this speech and at the Y, the 92nd Street Y?
92nd, right, exactly.
And this woman comes up to him and says, "I'm really a huge fan of yours. I'm retarded." And he looks at her. And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. You don't look retarded." And he says, and she gets angry. She says, "I said I'm from Target." And of course, I thought it was hilarious. The crowd didn't seem to find it funny. But,
No, I would imagine they wouldn't. But I love
can you
the
imagine?
story.
I said I'm from Target. So it's what you hear. I went to a party over the weekend, and a woman introduced herself to me, and I thought she said her name was Trixie, like the dog, and the whole crowd just thought that was the greatest thing. Her name was Rixie, and I said Trixie, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're gonna call you Trixie from now on." Bah, 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 bah. But I heard Trixie instead of Rixie. But
so I think I mentioned on Unbuttoned that Bob and I took a short trip to Iceland, sort of in celebration of my birthday at the end of September. And a couple points. One, I was forewarned that eating in Iceland is very expensive. So imagine my surprise when we had 2 lamb burgers, 2 drinks, and a brownie for dessert, and it came to $138.
Oh, were you in Rehoboth?
Okay, so you're familiar with that pricing, right? And I said to Tim earlier, we didn't see many dogs, and I actually looked it up online, and there are plenty of dogs in Iceland, but they're expensive because you have vet care and everything's brought in, right? The food and stuff.
I was going to say, is there any manufacturing base in Iceland? I don't think so.
Tim, it's such a great question. So we were on this tour bus one day, and they were talking. The tour operator, the woman, "Hello, my dears. Hello. We are on our way to the crater, the volcanic crater. The volcano is no longer operational, but there are many that are. I mean, you may wonder about our roads. They're all fantastic. Why is this? Well, because we have basalt. Basalt is everywhere because that is what comes out of the lava. So apparently they could make, the raw ingredients for laying it down a roadbed is all over the place. And in fact, if you remember Craters of the Moon National Park?
Yeah.
Remember how it was just a field of lava?
Is that what it looked like?
Iceland is a lot like that, except over the hundreds of years, moss has grown on a lot of this. And there are mountains and stuff, but it was... Wow. And our last day there, we did horseback riding. And I was given a horse. The woman says to me, and they put you in like a suit that you would wear snowmobiling. It zips up. It has fleece lining and a helmet you have to wear. I get on my horse, and I said to the woman who hands me the reins, I said, "What is the horse's name?" And I thought she said Esmeralda. And I'm like, "Come on, Esmeralda." The horse is like, yeah, I'm patting the side. And she comes up to me. She goes, "That is not the horse's name." I said, "Well, that's what I heard." And she said, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's Etsmelda or something. Etsmelda.
Esmeralda. Let's go.
Yeah, Esmeralda. And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She goes, "It means the blacksmith." So it took me a while to figure out that the second half of the name, Smelder, is like smelting, like the origins of the word. But finally, when it heard its name pronounced correctly, the head comes up and it does this thing.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I did fall off at one point. We were stationary. We had an hour into it was a 2-hour ride. It was gorgeous. It was friends. If you go to Iceland, look up horseback riding and do it. Especially the day was perfectly sunny, blue sky, not a cloud in it. It was a great group of people, and we come to an hour out. We were by a like a little river and a waterfall, and it's time to take a break. And she said, "Lean very far forward and swing your leg over the back, and you can hop off." So I lean not far enough forward, start to swing my leg over. My other one comes out, and I land on my butt on the grass. And everybody's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, the only thing damaged is my ego." But it was easy after that. And then when the horse would start to run, it would randomly do that. Like, let's catch up with the other horses. I don't know how people rode horses all day. I don't know how you were in the saddle all day.
No.
There must be a rhythm to it, right? The up and down.
You got to bounce
thing.
with them. Yeah. You got to bounce along with them. Otherwise, it's boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. Towards the end, I kind of got into it. Like I just allowed it to happen. But I was always afraid I was going to get thrown off. Like that I was going to because have you gone horseback riding?
Oh, yeah. I actually took care of a horse when I was younger. I had a horse named Nellie.
Really?
Yeah, I used to ride every day.
Wait a minute. Wait. Why have I not? I've known you since you were a sophomore in high school or freshman. Yeah. And
all during, I would say up until I was 15. I took care of this horse. It was neighbors and
standard American, like little tall, like big horse.
It was a black pony, and
beautiful.
they had 3 horses. And I always wanted a horse. Of course, we didn't have the space nor the wherewithal to have one. And so the neighbor said their daughter was no longer interested. She got older and didn't care about the horse. And so it became my horse. I mean, every day after school, I would go, I'd brush her, take care of her. She looked beautiful. They ended up selling her. I was so upset when they sold her because I would ride her. She would often throw me off. I got thrown off a million times. She purposely would stop short and put her head down and go down like a slide. And the one thing I couldn't do, I could never ride bareback. I always tried to ride bareback because a lot of the girls in the neighborhood rode bareback. I could not ride bareback, but I always saddled her up, and I was upset when she left because we started building a bond. I mean, every day. I spent 2-3 hours with her every day after school. Probably 3 or 4 years.
Wow, like Tim, that's new to me. I think their horses are beautiful animals. They're gorgeous.
I loved her. Yeah, she was a
and
great,
they're
great
all
horse.
muscle. It's like they're almost scary too. And I did ask, so one of the guides on our horseback trip did ride bareback, and I said to her, "Is this your horse?" She goes, "No, the horse knows me extremely well." And she goes, "To ride bareback, your horse, you have to have a bond with the horse. They have to know you." And I just said, "Well, how long does that take?" And she actually said, "It's not like dogs or cats. They don't instantly fall in love with you. You have to earn their trust. You have to be around them. You're constant visiting with the horse and brushing the horse and everything. That builds the bond. But they're gorgeous animals. I mean, yeah. So
Iceland has no standing military, right? You didn't see any military there, did you?
No.
So the U.S. protects it, as does Canada and the Danes and whoever else through NATO. They got a pretty good deal, Iceland. Who's going to invade Iceland?
I think Reykjavik is a national capital that's the furthest north in the world. I had to think about that, but it's even further than like Oslo.
Right.
And the other thing is with these prices with food, like energy is almost cheap and free because of the geothermal. They generate a lot of their own electricity through geothermal means, so they do import gasoline and some oil. Everything else is brought in, though. They do have special hothouses for tomatoes and stuff like that, but everything is brought in. And I asked a woman, one of the guides, I said, how do Icelanders, well, we don't go out that often. We cook at home. And she said, in the average take-home pay for most people in Iceland is around 5,700 euros a month. That's not that bad. When you convert it to like US, you're like, wait a minute,
It's
of
like
course,
84,000. Yeah.
40% of their take-home goes to taxes, but they have national health care. They have an excellent school system. So again, they're getting their money's worth, but it was a really great trip.
I wonder if they were more, did you find, or did you think they were more European or more, because Greenland and Iceland, they were always kind of on the cusp of being, are you European or are you North American? Did you sense that there was a European vibe
It
there?
felt more European to me. Okay. But they were, having said that, English was the primary language. They all spoke 2 or 3 languages. Friendly as all get out. A youthful country, very youthful. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there's like kids everywhere, but the average Icelander looks younger, and everybody there was super thin.
I wonder what else they would speak. So if they spoke Icelandic, right?
Icelandic and English was
English,
primary.
and then what would next be? Swedish,
Spanish,
or Norwegian, Spanish, really?
Yeah,
because they all travel there for vacation.
Yes, exactly.
Like the Brits.
Yeah, like exactly. And we met a great Brit couple, Mike and Ian. Naya and Mike. He was a visual effects, special effects / makeup artist. He just finished some work on The House of Dragon, and she was an HR finance person, and they were really, really funny. They were British, and we brought up Little Britain, Catherine Tate, absolutely fabulous, and they were doing all the routines with us, and they said, of course, they're forbidden now because they're not.
They're all been taken down. That's funny. Well, I envy you because I've always wanted to go to Iceland, so maybe someday
I would go
I'll make it
back,
there.
and I would also recommend the Blue Lagoon, which is one of their geothermal hot baths, which was incredibly fun. Met some great people there. And with the Golden Circle, the one we didn't do is called the Southern Circle, which has a few more waterfalls and some incredibly beautiful caves and geological formations, but it's like a 12-hour day, and we didn't really feel like 12 hours. All right, without further ado, Mr. Bennett, what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
So this came from our listener, Greg in New Jersey, sent me this, and the headline is from the Los Angeles
I love when our
Times.
listeners send us stuff, right?
It's who's leaving bottles of pee in Pasadena. So this is in Pasadena, California. So 2 TikTok filmmakers have made it their number one concern. So this is on the south side. If you're from California, you're familiar with the area. On the south side of Route 134 freeway in Pasadena, there's a light box or a utility box from the utility company, the Pasadena Water and Power Company. And there's an electrical box there in Colorado Boulevard, and since 2022, somebody's been leaving bottles of urine on top of it. And they can't figure out who's doing it. So these 2 guys had decided, Derek Milton and Grant Yansura, dressed up like construction workers, they decided they were going to investigate. So they took an old Dreyer's vanilla ice cream tub and an old Subway cup and set up some cameras around to see if they can catch this guy. And they've done this 6-part documentary series about the pee bottles.
Is the documentary series like on YouTube or something?
Yeah,
or
it's on TikTok. It's got over 6 million views for the first one. What are we doing wrong, right? We got to find something like this, Nash.
Yeah.
6 million views of this documentary, and people trying to figure out they called him the Piss Bandit, is what his nickname. And so they actually have had cameras of him, and they've seen him, but they can't identify him. The police have also set up cameras, as has the public utility. And what happens is he goes there, and then when he finds whoever the Piss Bandit is, takes the cameras and takes them down or removes them. One of the last cameras they put up also it was like a Ring camera, I guess, so they were able to speak to him. And they said, hey, you're the piss guy. One guy said of Derek and Grant, he was drunk at a casino, but they were so excited that the Ring cam went off. And they tried to talk to him. Could you please identify yourself? They didn't want to necessarily identify who he was, but wanted to know what the heck he was doing and why he's leaving these bottles of urine. They initially thought that he was providing clean urine for people to pass drug tests. Somebody else thought that maybe it was a front for liquefied drugs. So they actually took some of the urine and tested it and found out, in fact, that it was clean, healthy, human urine. And so this 6-part documentary, they're doing the 7th installment now, the Pasadena Department of Water and Power put up a metal pyramid on the box so that the urine samples could not be left there, but the guy has come with a crowbar and ripped off the pyramid top. So he's still leaving the urine. And what they've said is they think that the guy is obviously listening to their documentary series or their podcast on TikTok. They said because he used to just label the bottles urine or whatever, and now he's actually naming them human, or he's labeling them human piss. They used to say human urine, but since they've nicknamed him the Piss Bandit, he now labels them as human piss. They've also left him aboard with a Sharpie to see if he would respond to anything, but he won't answer any questions, and as of yet, still not identified. So what an odd thing, right? Somebody filling up bottles, and if you're watching, there's actually one of the pictures, there's 13 bottles of urine in all various sizes and plastic bottles just sitting on top.
Yeah, juice bottles, water bottles, Coke.
So if anyone knows who the Piss Bandit is in Pasadena, let us know.
Tim, I will say that you sent the picture, you sent the headline, and my initial thought was that this was some kind of environmental thing where they were going to like collect this and purify it and put the water back. This is not what I was expecting at all.
No, it was funny when I got when it got sent to me through our listener Greg, and I thought, wow, this is I missed that one.
Yeah, and this is why our listeners, we always, Tim and I, if you know something that caught your eye, forward it to us.
Let us know. Yeah.
Send you a pair of focus group socks. Mine could not be any further away than the Piss Bandit. I mean, in fact, mine's a little more high-mounted and highbrow.
Of course. Well, you can't get lower.
Thank you for that one, Tim. I like that line. So mine is actually about the Pacific Ocean, and the headline is Cleanup Group says it's on track to eliminate the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So you may or may not have heard, I'm sure many have heard, that in the Pacific Ocean, there's this, because of the way the currents are, there's this enormous patch of plastic garbage, estimated to be 79,000 metric tons just floating in the ocean. It's about, they put the size roughly twice the size of Texas, okay? And think about that. And they've been debating what to do about it. So this company called Ocean Cleanup has been running tests on a system that would kind of dragnet they would be able to encircle this and kind of collect the plastic slowly. They're at phase 3 now, and they're trying to raise something called 7.5 billion to, in fact, tackle this enormous thing. And their CEO says today's announcement is clear. Clean oceans can be achieved in a manageable time and for a clear cost. To put that into perspective, the dollar amount, what they're looking for is about 1 month of Apple's profits, 7.5 billion, or one-sixth of the bonus Tesla shareholders recently awarded to Elon Musk. So when you put it that way, it seems like this is a very cost-effective thing. They do believe it's going to take up to 5 years, and they've, as I just said, they've done experimentation on the first 2 iterations of this thing. But it's a large boom, they call it, and it slowly, they have boats that drag it along, and it slowly captures the plastic, and it moves onto an area that is like almost at the water level. Then ships lift that up, and it gets dumped on a deck, and they have to process it and bring it ashore. But massive thing. I mean, to think that we have 79,000 metric tons, equal to the size of 2 states of Texas, floating in the Pacific Ocean from all our waste is galling to me. But
yeah.
Then we have the Piss Bandit. So take your pick.
Yeah, I saw the video of them taking some of the stuff out of the ocean. They were holding things up, toilet seat covers, barrels, all kinds of crap.
Hypodermics, toys.
Yeah.
Children's toys and stuff like that.
So, no, the plastics are a problem. But.
Well, and garbage is a problem in general, and the ocean is responsible for our ecosystem is very dependent on the oceans. I'll get off my soapbox now, but say, look, if we can pay 1/6, if you could take 1/6 of an Elon Musk bonus that Tesla just gave him, and you could clean up the Pacific Ocean, why, do it, right?
Or maybe he can come up with some way to do it since he's so brilliant.
Yeah. As he gets further and further into X and politics, I'm not so sure how brilliant he is, but we'll leave it there. All right, so as many of you know, Deep Discount is a partner of ours here on the Focus Group. We've been with them for years, and last month we played the Criterion giveaway game. Criterion Collection gave us discs to give away, and I would play an audio clue, and listeners would send us the name of the movie. Everybody did great. I'm preparing the prizes now. Many played more than one time and got the movies correct on every time. I think listener Billy, Billy is up there. Chris, Mark. There's a whole group of people who really know movies. So I'm going to quickly, before we do the deep discount segment, let you know where each clue came from. So week 1 of September, we had this.
Dorothy, get back to work.
Excuse me, but Dorothy's under my jurisdiction as well, you know. And I say she can listen to a spot of music if she likes.
That movie was Gosford Park, and that was Julian Fellowes' big film. He won an Oscar for that. And that, of course, if you know, Gosford Park is the lead into what he did with Downton Abbey. Here's week 2.
Observations. The use of fans, particularly in Act 1, was flabby and erratic.
Very scrappy.
Indeed, Owen.
All right, so that was from the movie Topsy-Turvy. The actor was Jim Broadbent, and that's about Gilbert and Sullivan, and they were putting on the Mikado. The Mikado's that Japanese-themed, so the fan users, that was where that came from. All right, this next clue was week 3.
That was Karma, you little slut girls, you little freshman sluts! Get up! Get up! Up!
Congrats to everybody who sent that in. Everybody knew it was Mean Girl Parker Posey, and the movie was Dazed and Confused. Bob and I love that movie. Watch it. It's a time capsule of a time that if you grew up in that period, you're like, oh, I miss it.
Was it the 80s or the 90s?
Dazed and Confused took place. I would say it was this. It must be the 80s, yeah. It was before phones were still attached to the wall. You went to a party, the whole bit. And the last week of the game was this clue.
I make my salads on Monday, and I keep them frozen all week. I think I know what I'm doing.
Debbie Reynolds in the movie, Albert Brooks movie, Mother, and many of you knew her voice right away and nailed the movie. So congrats to everybody. I'm preparing gifts or the discs to send out. I'm going to try to get every single person who played because, as I said, people played multiple times, and they won multiple times. So you're going to get a disc. Okay, so moving on.
I knew none of those.
You probably knew Dazed and Confused. I thought you might have known that. You never saw Dazed and Confused?
No.
Tim, you got to call it up and watch it. I think you and Richard will love Dazed and Confused. It's a movie where nothing bad happens, but you're going to recognize everything you did in high school. You're going to be like, oh, wow, I remember this.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a Halloween sale going on at Deep Discount, and obviously the holidays coming up soon. And without further ado, Mr. Bennett, what was your pick from Halloween sale?
So there were a lot of great things there at the sale that I saw and movies that I'd recommended just recently. And this I recommended a while back, but I went down a rabbit hole a little bit. So it's the Munsters, the complete series. And so you can get the Munsters, the complete series. Plus it also includes the 2 full-length feature films in color, Munsters Go Home and The Munsters Revenge. But as I was reading about this, something popped up on the screen while I was at Deep Discount, and then I clicked on a link. And they talked about how the Munsters, the Beverly Hillbillies, the Addams Family, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, all these shows we grew up with were really important because of the time of 64, 65, 66, all around civil rights and the importance of fitting in and the importance of being different and trying to these TV studios of trying to find a way without using race to talk about the other and the importance of the other. And they used the Munsters as they said the Munsters was uniquely positioned to speak on civil rights and issues of fitting in. The entire show revolved around the concept of being an outsider. As a result, the Munsters consistently taught its viewers not to base judgment on outward appearance, but to look inward instead. And they said that, and I've said to you before in watching it, before I even read this, that there's so many underlying lines that when you're watching the show that they throw in zingers about what was happening currently in the political environment. They said recently there's a TikTok clip going around that Gen Z is quite interested in. and it's getting shown and got millions of views. And it was from episode 19, I think, from 1964. And it was Eddie's nickname. And Herman is sitting there, sitting at the dinner table. And Eddie was being teased, and he was teasing other kids. And so Herman looks at him and says to Eddie, "It doesn't matter what you look like. You can be tall or short, fat or thin, or ugly and handsome, like your father. Or you can be black or yellow or white. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the size of your heart and the strength of your character." And the whole family's sitting there. And then Lily looks over at Eddie and says, "Do you understand what your father means?" And he nods yes. And then she says, "Well, now that we've solved the little problem, one of the little problems of growing up, let's enjoy our meal."
Wow.
And,
wow.
So when you think about it, I've never certainly thought about these 60s sitcoms like that. They talked about Bewitched, and they talked about how a lot of them were just very much a part of the civil rights movement, and I guess people didn't get it or understand it.
Tim, I would have never hooked it in, but now that you say it, and now that example of Herman talking to Eddie, if you think about all the shows, right? There was always characters that were out there, but they were treated as normal, right?
And they said the other part, too, which I thought was even more interesting. They said, and there was also an alleged gay agenda at the time that was going on. They said they would often cast closeted but known gay actors or by featuring flamboyant characters. And they said that there were straight sitcoms and gay sitcoms. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. So they said, for instance, The Adventures of Superman, straight, Batman, gay. I Dream of Jeannie, straight, Bewitched, gay.
Gay, yeah.
The Munsters, straight, The Addams Family, gay.
Gay.
The Beverly Hillbillies, straight, Green Acres, gay. And they went again through this, sound to me like an interesting class that I would want to take about breaking down these 60s sitcoms and what they've done. So sorry I went off on this tangent offshoot on this, but I thought it was interesting. So I picked the Munsters, and
we learned something along the way, right?
Yeah. So that was the one.
Tim, that's fantastic. All right, mine is not so nearly as earth-shattering. You're not going to learn much, but you will learn about a movie you should pick up on DVD for like $7. It's called The Changeling, and it stars George C. Scott. This is what I call psychological horror. Like nothing gruesome happens, but it's that tension that builds up if they do it right. So here's the synopsis. Composer John Russell, who's played by George C. Scott, is vacationing with his family when a car accident kills his wife and daughter. Distraught with grief, Russell leaves his home in New York City for a giant, secluded house near Seattle. Soon, Russell starts to feel the presence of a ghost, a boy who drowned in the bathtub there. Russell seeks the assistance of Claire Norman, Trish Van Devere, who led him to the house initially in uncovering the secrets of the boy's death. And it's just like there's a rubber ball in this movie that bounces down a staircase. I mean, it was the most terrifying scene I remember seeing when I was like a teenager, with this little red ball, punk, 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 going down the stairs. So it's called The Changeling.
I'll have to see that because I love those kind of psychological. I don't like blood and gore. That's not
I'm
my
not a
thing.
blood and gore. But you would this was more of a mystery wrapped in the tension of a ghost story. And the film this week, the new release is called Thelma, and you may recognize the actress. She was in a movie that Tim has picked on once or twice for. She was in Nebraska, that black and white film, Tim.
Yep.
93-year-old L.A. widow Thelma Post, played by June Squibb, that's the actress, didn't have much going on beyond her visits, albeit with his handout from grandson Daniel. When a phone scammer claiming to be Daniel bilks her into mailing $110,000, so it's topical, she settles on a more direct course than the cops or consumer hotline by tracking the fraud to its source and demanding her cash. Winning farce co-stars, it's a farcical comedy. Parker Posey's in it, Clark Gregg, Malcolm McDowell, and in the screen farewell, Richard Roundtree. So that is the new release this week. It's called Thelma, and it looks fun to me, especially, as I said, she's on the trail of someone who, scammed her out of money. We've been hearing about that. So
be sure to head over to Deep Discount. Get there by going to focusgroupradio.com and clicking on the Deep Discount logo. There's a Halloween sale going on. And thanks to all of you who played. John says pick that flick and participated. with our friends from the Criterion Collection, and deep discount as John gets those discs sent out to all of you. This week I picked The Munsters, the complete series. John picked The Changeling, and the new release is Thelma. And thanks again to our friends at Deep Discount. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a business birthday and a quick shop talk to share with you, so stay with us.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett. Focusgroupradio.com is our site. Check us out there, and you'll learn about our partners and also our companion podcast called TFG Unbuttoned. Now, without further ado, we have a business birthday for you.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So born today, October 9th, happy 83rd birthday to Brian Patrick Lamb, born October 9th, 1941. He's an American journalist. He's the founder and executive chairman, although he's now retired, of C-SPAN, which is the cable network that provides coverage of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, as well as other public service sorts of shows. I don't know if you've watched Book Notes, which is like an hour series they do with books. He grew up in Lafayette, Indiana, which happens to be where the Subaru plant is, by the way. He grew up in Lafayette, Indiana. He always was interested in being a DJ or working within radio and communications. He went off to Purdue University and ended up going to Navy Officers Candidate School. And from there, during the Vietnam War, he was very much involved in public affairs and working again with communications within the military. When he got out, he worked for a couple of senators and the Johnson administration, along with some other folks, senators and representatives along the way, doing their PR, helping them as press secretary. And he always felt like there was something missing. And based in D.C., was heavily involved, had a lot of interest in politics. So on a whim, as he was working on creating some coverage or trying to get additional coverage as to what was happening in our government, in 1977, he submitted to cable television executives a proposal for a nonprofit channel that would broadcast the official proceedings of Congress. And he said the risks weren't very significant because no one really knew who he was. And he said if he failed, it would just be kind of a so what. But he said the idea was approved in December of 77, and the Cable Satellite Public Affairs Network was created. It was a private nonprofit business with a board. When they started, they only had 4 employees. They had an annual budget of about $450,000, and they went on the air on March 19th, 1979, with live coverage of the House of Representatives. Currently, they reach over 100 million households, employ over 300 people, and they cover a variety of public affairs programming, things like presidential press conferences, rallies, events, Senate hearings. Have expanded to 3 channels. There's C-SPAN, C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN 3.
BBC One, BBC Two.
And you can also get a number of, you can go, and I listen often to, as I mentioned earlier, Book Notes, and listen to him interview authors with more in-depth interviews. They said what makes him different, if you've not watched him, is he always felt that too many interviewers would intrude too much. And they try to make you think that you're smarter than the person or they want to make you think they're smarter than the person they're interviewing. So he said, I always want to make it appear as if they are smarter and I'm not smarter. And they said, for instance, when he's interviewed all the world leaders and presidents and so forth, but in many cases, these 1-hour interviews, if you add it up, he would talk less than 5 minutes over the course of the hour.
Wow.
He'd throw out a line
really
or
gave
throw
them
out a topic. Gave
really
out a
stage, yeah.
Exactly right. That's a good way of putting it. He said for each interview, he's like us, John. He said if there was an author, he always read the book, and he always said he spent at least 20 hours preparing for each interview that he gave. So
Tim's not kidding. We were
happy birthday
at Sirius.
to,
We were known as the guys that did all the good.
Read the books.
We read the books. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. That's it. So happy birthday to BrianLamb. An odd business birthday, I think, but again, saw a need for something and created it. And
he gave us the ability to watch Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
all the crazy,
all the crazy going on with the Republican conference. Yeah.
Yeah. I go back and listen. He was David McCullough, the historian, was they were good friends, and he interviewed him quite a bit. And I actually watched after the business birthday came up. I watched a recent interview he did where one of his last books McCullough did about the American spirit. And then there was a group of historians that all got together. I think there were 8 or 9 of them after the 2016 election. And boy, I was going to copy it and post it. Each historian went through about the what they felt the dangers of having the Trump presidency would be. And
So
this
that was
was
the 2020
This was
election.
2016.
2016.
And
Were they
all
right?
of these historians, well, it's so prophetic, right? Because you listen to it now and you're like, oh my God, nothing's changed.
Wow.
But they talked about integrity, character, honesty. They said these are things that our forefathers of all strive to as forming a nation. Talked about the importance of education and an educated populace. They said Thomas Jefferson said, if your population's not educated, you'll never have democracy. And you can just see the fear of me, at least, listening to it and listening to these historians, many who have passed, talk about the importance of knowing our history and being educated as a populace to survive in a democracy. It's just
So I think a week ago, Bob Costa subbed in for, I forget who the host of the CBS political show is after, CBS Sunday Morning.
right.
And he had on Stanley McChrystal, or
Okay.
General McChrystal, who was under Obama. And he was asking him all these questions, and he's basically a Republican, but he's going to be voting for the Harris ticket, Harris-Walz. And Bob Costas said to him, like, well, what are the policies? And he just looked at Bob Costas and he said, their political reporter, and he's like, it doesn't matter in some ways what their policies are because I'm voting for character.
Right.
I'm voting for a person who I know has the character to solve the problems that comes before them in a way that is true to our American heritage, our democracy, our integrity. And he had this whole, and I was like, wow. I wish the news media would pay more attention to this because they're going after, Kamala for, you said fracking was this in Pennsylvania, now you're saying that. They don't go after Trump because he sits down and starts rambling and nobody even just stops him. I thought his answer is right in line with what you're talking about, right?
Well, in this interview, they said, and honesty, which was huge. And they said that there's actually an inscription in the White House on the fireplace from John Adams. And he said, if you think about our 2 first presidents, he said the trust the American people had in them was all based on honesty, and they were honest to them. They said they never disparaged their opponents. They never spoke ill of a rival, but they were honest and they had integrity and character. And that's what you want to have in a leader.
Yeah.
So I hope you go out and vote.
Yeah. That's Tim. Yeah. And vote character. So we, at the top of the show, I teased a shop talk about the death of the work from remote work. And this comes to us from, I think it's Inc. magazine.
Yep.
And the headline is CEOs predict remote work will be dead in just 3 years. So it is from Inc. And the subhead was fascinating. They're going to make sure this is true, that it's dead in 3 years, by withholding raises and promotions. So 53% of employed Americans who work from home at least some of the time are going to be in for a rude awakening. KPMG surveyed a whopping 79% of U.S. corporate CEOs who then predicted that corporate roles performed in the office before the pandemic will be back in the office full-time within the next 3 years. Just a few short months ago, only 34% thought that would be true, but that number's changed significantly. And they are saying this because they believe that the softening labor market and a recent wave of mandates, Amazon might be a prime example of this, of having people return to the office, is what gives them the moxie to say, hey, in 3 years' time, remote work's going to be dead. But Tim, this was a unique solution to a very, very real problem in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. But a lot of people jumped on this bandwagon as if it was going to be the new way of working forever and ever and ever. And you and I often talked about it, about office buildings, businesses that, thrive on office workers. So were you surprised by the survey results at all?
I was surprised only because I think a lot of, particularly in larger companies, if you look at General Motors or Amazon and some of the tech companies that have required people to come back, they've had a lot of pushback. And so I think they were being
cautious.
Yeah, maybe cautious wasn't the right word. I was going to say cautious, but I think they were just being, maybe they're waiting it out, because at the end of the day, they're saying you can't manage employees that aren't in the office, right? How do you manage an employee if you just see them on Zoom once a day, or maybe you don't see them at all that day? And I know in Philadelphia, even the city of Philadelphia, the mayor has ordered all employees back into the city offices because they were doing things at home, working at home. And again, they talked about, you've said this many times about Manhattan, so much of the infrastructure built around some of these large office buildings with workers, whether it's a little bodega downstairs, somebody buying a newspaper, somebody getting a pack of gum, going out to lunch, whatever it is, right? There's a thriving ancillary business.
That's a whole ecosystem.
Right.
You kill the office building and all the workers in it, and you kill everything at the ground level that supports it, right?
But what's happened is I've talked to a couple of friends that we know in Manhattan that have said that their companies, so they renegotiated, got rid of space, and it may be a big ad agency or it could be a pharma company or a financial company, and now they've ordered everyone back to work and there's no space. I was talking to a couple of people, said if you don't get in early enough, you're sitting on the floor or you're in a hallway or you're trying to share a desk or something, because they've taken out the individual offices or whatever and have these just big...
You bring your laptop in and...
Bring your laptop in, but nobody has a space, quote unquote, like you used to have, whether it was a cube or an office. And there's just no space, because if you were saying, okay, you only have to be in 3 days a week, you can you can stretch out who's in the office when. But if you tell everybody to come back now, if you went down from, you had 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet down to 5, how are you going to fit everybody in there? So that's the other issue going on. They did say, on the positive, if you're an entrepreneur and you didn't care about whether anybody worked at home or not, maybe you can pick up some good talent, because people are not going to want to go back in to the offices full time. I know Richard's got some friends in the hospital that they do not want to go back in, but they're being told they have to. And so whether they retire or figure something else out, but I'm kind of with you. That's what you had to do, right? You had to go to the office.
It was, and I'll tell you, look, I work out of home. I have a home office. It's an actual office. It's a room. But I will find myself at the local library at least 3 days a week sometimes, just to change the scene and to actually go somewhere. There's a division between work and home, right? Now, the article also went in, the second half of the article said that maybe these return to office mandates could be layoffs in disguise. And they talked about that a little bit and saying maybe there's a thought process that they keep the best and the ones that are coming in, and through attrition and through not following the mandate to return, they may lose headcount. But the author concluded by saying that, that's kind of hard to believe, because they're talking about 3 years, so if it was a cost-cutting measure, or they might, a headcount reduction thing, maybe not the case. So I think it really does come down to the fact that we said this in the 2020, 2021, and 2022. Teamwork is different when you're talking to a computer.
Right.
There's just so many visual cues and the things that happen after meetings. There's the meeting, then there's the talking in the hallway at the water fountain, that just doesn't happen.
Body language, right? Just regular body language, right? And eye contact.
And Tim often talked to me in the past when he was at Subaru, the amount of times that a senior executive would literally just walk into your office hey, Tim-san, how you doing? Can you do that? That doesn't happen when you're remote. You know, you can't come down to Tim's office and say, hey, I just got this thing, and could you look into this for me? Thank you. And it's an email. You know, it's just easier, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I think it's important to be in the office and be seen. You and I often talk about people who have gone off to be remote and out of sight, out of mind. Now, if you're just there for your paycheck and you're at the tail end of your career and that's all you want to do, there's something to be said for that, I suppose. But generally, you're right. You don't you miss out on a lot if you're not present, and so we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see whether if we're still on the air, John.
True. Yeah.
Whether people are back at work. So hey, thanks for joining us here on the Focus Group. We appreciate the time you spent with us. We're in our 15th year. Was it 15th, John,
16,
or 16th?
Tim, 16.
Why did I say 15? 16th year. And so learn all about us at focusgroupradio.com. You could also, by the way, check out our agency site, which is tribury.co, TRIBURY.co. If you know anyone that wants to do any advertising to the LGBTQ consumer, considering we got this craziness going on with all these companies dropping out of their DEI initiatives, and as John says,
But you and I say,
very different from marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a look there. Thanks to our friends at Deep Discount. There's a Halloween sale going on right now, as John mentioned, and thanks to those who played during Criterion Month. John will be getting those gifts out, or those discs out to you shortly. This week's picks, I picked The Munsters, a complete series.
Yay.
John picked The Changeling, and the new release is Thelma. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us. Remember, be safe when you're out there. It's getting darker now, earlier, unfortunately, but don't text and drive. Arrive alive, and we'll see you next time here on the Focus Group.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.